Hello and welcome to another edition of Sustainable Resilience. I'm your host, David Dodd, and it's my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome a very special guest with us today, Arvind Mayaram, who is the former Treasury Secretary of India, who is with us today at the Resilience 2020 event here in New Orleans, Louisiana. Arvind is a public-private partnership expert of international renown, and we're going to have a discussion today. And so, Arvind, welcome. So thank you for coming.
Thank you
and
very much,
honored
David,
that you're here.
for having me here with you.
It's our honor and pleasure. This event, as you know, is the first of its kind, bringing specialist centers under the UNECE International Public-Private Partnership Center of Excellence together, and looking at how to really provide action and real meaning to the term people first public-private partnerships. I know that you are a colleague and friend of Jeffrey Hamilton, who leads the International Center of Excellence. If you could tell us what interested you in the possibility of coming here and being a part of this effort.
So, two parts. The first, of course, is the fact that with the emergence of a need for providing a certain level of standard of living to people by 2030, which are enshrined in the SDGs.
Yes.
The importance of organizing private investment in public development programs has never been more important than it has become now. The governments are now constrained for resources.
Yes.
And there is also a fiscal headroom issue in terms of borrowing more in the public sector. So therefore, private investment is necessary, and public-private partnerships are a way forward. However, we have seen in the last, say, 30 years or so, when PPPs have really grown, that public has become restricted to as government, which is not necessarily the voice or will of the communities who get affected by development.
Right.
But the entire kind of an amorphous will of the people through elections, which is much larger than the communities which get affected. And private, of course, is the private capital, which is looking more for profits.
Yes.
And that's why the emphasis on people first has also become very critical, to be able to get them as part of the development process and their voice to be heard. So the importance of people first PPPs and the center of excellence, which are looking at different aspects, critical aspects of development through this particular mode, have become important. I think you are doing a phenomenal work here, and your center of excellence has really been acknowledged and has been looked upon by the developing world to learn a lot of lessons from. So therefore, that was first reason why I came here. And the second is, of course, in terms of the resilience part,
Yes.
which is the management of disasters and prevention of disasters.
Yes.
In many cases, which now is also very critical with climate change and other issues coming to the fore. India is also not immune from these changes which are happening.
Yes, I'm aware. Yes.
Our glaciers, for instance, are melting very rapidly, and many of our perennial rivers are in danger of getting extinct if the global warming continues in the manner in which it is continuing. We are also running short of water, fresh water, with a population of close to 1.2 billion people. India would be looking at the issue of fresh water very closely. And therefore, the whole issue of the poisoning of aquifers, or also the damaging of rivers, the pollution of rivers, these have become very critical. And therefore, resilience is now at the heart of all developmental discourse and discussion. And so I am very keen to look forward, I'm keenly looking forward to seeing how you are addressing many of these issues.
Well, thank you for that. The real issue that we see when it comes to resilience, is really twofold. There are public-private partnerships which, in of themselves, can increase resilience, such as flood protection systems or earthquake-proofing earthquake-proofing buildings and providing for that. But then there's also the issue of, as my senior vice president, David Baxter, says, future-proofing all infrastructure investments through resilience. And it's a matter, as you know, of cost. It costs more to make infrastructure more resilient in the short term, but in the long term, the evidence shows that it actually saves quite a bit in terms of not having to do as much repair in the case of a disaster, or being able to be more sustainable over a longer period of time. And again, as you're a foremost expert in PPPs, how do you see that playing out in India, in you're rapidly developing a new infrastructure, I know, throughout the nation. And how do you see that in real terms when you're talking to the private sector and you're talking to both sides in putting together a concession or an agreement? Where do you see the future role of integrating resilience into those public-private partnerships?
So there are three parts to this, David. The first is we have already, in the PPPs we have seen, we generally take a life cycle cost.
Oh,
And when you take a life cycle cost of an infrastructure project,
yes.
what we'll need to now begin to see, which has not been done till now, is the cost of not being resilient. We have seen in terms of cost of maintenance, we have seen the cost of renewal of infrastructure. We have never really quantified what is the cost of not being resilient. And I think that is something we need to introduce now. So the cost of not being resilient is going to be perhaps higher than the cost of being resilient. And therefore, life cycle cost of a project with resilience is likely to be lesser than the life cycle cost of a project which is not resilient. So I think that is one important aspect that we need to introduce now,
Yes.
while doing the financial engineering of projects. So that is going to be very critical. The second part, which I think is going to be important, is we need to also educate the financial institutions, especially the ones which are looking at long-term finance.
Right.
So there are now, for instance, green finance is becoming a very important instrument of financing projects. The World Bank has put a green fund in place, and they are also lending for green projects. There are also green bonds now, so the capital market also is becoming smarter
Yes.
to this. But when we are talking of green, I think the specificity of resilience has to be introduced in the definition of green. It is not in terms of only saying that it has lesser carbon footprint and so on, but we need to also see in terms of a long-term resilience of a project. So in that sense, I think again we need to introduce those in the definition of what green is when we are looking at either long-term finance from multilateral institutions or even from pension funds or other financing bodies, and also as much as the capital markets. And that definitional change needs to come, and we need to work on that. And the third part, of course, is in terms of government policies itself. We need to be doing a lot of advocacy work in terms of making the government aware what it will entail if they will not look at resilience as part of their policy making. So I think on all those three, there is a need to work upon.
Such excellent points. This center was originally the International Resilience Center.
Mm-hmm.
And after discussing with Jeffrey Hamilton the absolute interconnection between sustainability and resilience, you can't have a sustainable asset if it's not resilient.
Absolutely.
you can't have a resilient asset if it's not sustainable.
I agree with
So
you.
we added sustainable because it is inherent in our mission. And that issue is so important, Mr. Secretary, because we have looked at the return in terms of reduced economic damage on investing more in making infrastructure resilient. And that return is generally around 4 to 1. In other words, if you invest $1 in resilience, that the reduced damages in the event of a disaster are $4 coming back to you in terms of reduced operating costs, reduced maintenance, reduced repairs. We're now trying to quantify that in a way that it can be utilized in a variety of situations. And we're in the middle of this venture this week. We're now headed, as you know, to other parts of Louisiana other than New Orleans to share, again, our experiences, to hear about experiences from Louisiana. And last night we had a presentation by the Chief Executive of the Greater New Orleans Foundation. And I would like to get your impressions of that and what you saw out of that presentation. Because again, we are starting here with this effort, but we want to be able to take this anywhere around the world. And the topic next time may be water and sanitation. And you've mentioned that there are parts of India that have water issues. And we may want to have Diogo Olivier lead that, and we all support him as everyone supporting our center in this effort. But I'd like to know what you thought about that presentation and about what happened in New Orleans in its recovery. And not even so much the activities, but the way they were organized and the way that, again, from neighborhood based initiatives up. Could you see that being translated to other nations, specifically India?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I was quite impressed with that presentation that was made yesterday. I was especially surprised, pleasantly surprised, I should say, because of the manner in which the use of public spaces as water storage has been done.
Yes.
In fact, I think for us in India, there is a great lesson for the opposite reason. Here you are trying to contain excess water by creating these spaces. In India, I think we'll need to do that for preserving water.
Yes.
So that we are able to provide water where there is a shortage of water by being able to use public spaces for creating landscaped lakes and other kind of ponds and other recipients of water, receptacles of water. I think there are a lot of lessons that can be learned. In fact, yesterday when I was seeing it, it struck me that I think we should be doing that for several of our places which are water deficit now, and there is a big problem of water which is happening. So water is going to be a big issue, and I think we will need to work as a global partners. And I think your center is going to be playing a very important role in that. I think also we need to look at the integration of water and wastewater.
Yes.
Because there is a lot of water which is wastewater, whether it's grey water or black water. And at the moment, the kind of treatment plants that we are looking at are very energy consuming. And therefore, that causes the other kind of resilience issue. Because when you use that much of energy, you are creating a footprint in the environment.
Yes.
So I think we'll need to also look at the manner in which, and therefore there are various methods that we have experimented, which perhaps other countries could learn from, which are the natural methods of cleaning water. At the moment, we are looking at a lot of the use of microorganisms and plants which clean water. So you run it through the sieve of plant roots to clean the water and so on, which is through gravity flow, and therefore you don't need any energy in that. So I think we need to do a lot more combining of knowledge, even local knowledge. There are also indigenous knowledge on issues which I think we have lost because we have gone in for some very large, grand motherhood type of solutions.
Yes.
And we need to go back to those also. So I think there is a lot of work that needs to be done. And I'm looking forward to working closely with your center to see that we can disseminate this to a wider platform.
And we would certainly look forward to working with you. And we'll see some additional innovations that are underway, specifically tomorrow afternoon in Baton Rouge, the state capital, where we'll be at the Water Institute of the Gulf, which is an organization dedicated to the use of water, management of water, who formed a consortium of all the states along Interstate 10 highway system that goes from Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California. Some states of which have too much water, some states of which do not have enough, and to come together and develop creative solutions and new innovations. And I think your discussion about how to treat wastewater, that is a part and parcel of resilience. And I think by bringing people together to share these ideas and then to maybe take these ideas and do something additional with those ideas, that's the source and the heart of innovation. And that's what we hope to facilitate at the International Sustainable Resilience Center. And we are, again, honored and pleasured that you are here and a part of this effort. And we look forward to many more interactions with you and with the nation of India in the future. In closing, there, as you know, was a visit by our president to your prime minister.
Yes.
And I think a new chapter has been opened between our countries. And we hope that that leads to further international cooperation on a broader scale. But it's very, very gratifying to have you here. And we are deeply appreciative of that. And so thank you again.
Thank you, David.
Thank you
you very
very
much.
much.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.